Under the cracked, sun-baked dirt of Niger, in West Africa, something was still alive. Not a hidden well, not roots planted last season, a forest, buried, silent, and far older than the drought sitting on top of it. Here's the exact story, so nothing about it stays vague. In 1983, an Australian agronomist named Tony Rinaudo, one bad day away from giving up entirely, knelt down next to what looked like a dead weed on a barren stretch of Nigerian farmland and found the root system of an entire forest still alive underneath it. Using nothing but a pruning technique now called Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration, or FMNR, farmers went on to regrow roughly 200 million trees across 5 million hectares of Niger without planting a single seedling, adding 500,000 tons of grain a year and helping feed 2.5 million people, right as a real famine arrived in 2005 to test whether any of it actually held up. The question worth sitting with is simple. How does an entire country regrow a forest with almost no money, no irrigation trucks, and no nurseries at all? The method has since spread to more than 25 countries, including Tanzania, where it's known by a different name entirely, Kisiki High. But here's the part almost nobody covers. For nearly 20 years, this discovery almost died a second time. Not from drought, not from failure, but from a single, forgotten law that made it illegal for a farmer to even own the tree he'd just saved. How that got solved is honestly the best part of this entire story. And by the end, you'll know exactly why the border between two countries became visible from outer space, using nothing but tree cover as the line. No subscribing yet. Just the story from the beginning. Reforestation, on paper, should have solved this decades ago. Since 2007, the African Union's Great Green Wall project has tried to plant an 8,000-kilometer barrier of trees from Senegal to Djibouti, backed by roughly $8 billion mobilized by 2020, according to the United Nations' own status report. That same report measured the result. Barely 4% of the target actually restored. By June of 2024, Reuters reported the UN's own desertification chief admitting the project would miss its 2030 deadline outright. Move the lens to northern Nigeria, and forestry officials there report an even blunter number. Of the 50 million tree seedlings planted every year across the country's 11 most drought-hit states, 37.5 million wither and die within 2 months. Researchers studying the wider Sahel put the regional failure rate even higher. 80% or more of planted trees never make it. The pattern repeats continent-wide. Africa is still losing close to 3.45 million hectares of forest a year, according to the UN's 2025 Global Forest Assessment. Billions of dollars, millions of saplings, press conferences full of shovels in the ground, and somehow the land keeps losing. The world kept counting how many trees went into the soil. Almost nobody was counting how many were still standing 5 years later. Reports arrive by the millions of trees planted, headline numbers built for a press release, not a forest census. And underneath every one of those failed campaigns, in fields nobody was monitoring. The actual answer had been alive the entire time. The failure has a mechanical explanation, not a mysterious one. A nursery seedling grows a soft, shallow root system built for a plastic pot, not a drought. Plant it right before the rains, and it has weeks, not years, to push roots down before the sun returns and the ground turns back to stone. Most don't make it. Multiply that single failure by tens of millions of seedlings a year across a dozen countries, and the cost stops being agricultural and starts being existential, both for the farmers who lose a season's labor and for donor governments watching their investment turn to firewood. For decades, this was simply accepted as the cost of doing business. Buy the seedlings, plant the seedlings, mourn the seedlings, repeat next year. Nobody in that cycle was looking at what was already underground, because the land, walked over by generation after generation of farmers and herders, looked completely empty. Empty, that is, unless someone happened to get out of the vehicle and actually look down. That someone was Tony Rinaudo, an Australian agronomist from Myrtleford, Victoria, who had arrived in Niger in the early 1980s with the missionary organization Serving in Mission. For years, Rinaudo did exactly what his training told him to do. Raise seedlings in a nursery, truck them into the desert, dig holes, plant, and pray. Daytime temperatures in that stretch of the Sahel regularly climb past 40 degrees Celsius, and every seedling that died represented weeks of water, labor, and hope poured straight into sand. By his own later account, until 1983, none of it had worked. The seedlings kept dying. Funding was thin, morale was thinner, and Rinaudo has since admitted he was close to quitting the entire project and going home. Then, on an ordinary drive across a landscape that looked like nothing but dust, he noticed a small, scrubby bush growing out of the cracked ground. For generations, farmers here had called shoots like it exactly one thing: weeds to be slashed before they competed with the millet. Rinaudo pulled over anyway. He knelt down, brushed back the sand around its base, and stopped. This wasn't a new seedling. It was a shoot growing directly out of the stump of a tree that had been cut down years, maybe decades before. A tree whose root system, it turned out, had never actually died. It had just been waiting underground the entire time, cut off at the ankles, and forgotten. During the colonial era, huge stretches of West Africa's native woodland had been cleared for monoculture farming, cut flush to the ground but rarely dug out by the roots. Underneath what looked like barren farmland, an entire root network belonging to species like Fadherbia albida, once classified as Acacia albida, had simply gone dormant, sending up thin. Stunted shoots that farmers and grazing animals cut back year after year without ever letting one grow tall. The science behind why explains the whole story. A healthy, single-stemmed tree produces a hormone called auxin from its topmost growing tip, and that hormone suppresses the growth of competing side shoots, forcing the root system to channel almost all of its energy into one dominant trunk. Cut that main stem away, and the suppression signal disappears. The root system responds like it's in a panic, pushing energy up through dozens of weak shoots at once, none of which ever gets enough resources to grow into a real tree, which is exactly why the land looked like scrubby wasteland instead of forest. There's a second layer to why this particular species matters so much. Fadherbia albida does something almost no other tree in the region does. It drops its leaves at the start of the rainy season, exactly when farmers need sunlight on their crops, and grows a full canopy back during the dry season, when shade and fallen, nitrogen-rich leaf litter matter most. Botanists call it reverse phenology. It means a tree that would normally compete with a farmer's millet for sunlight instead quietly rebuilds the soil around it, adding nitrogen the crops can use, while getting completely out of the way when it counts. Local farmers had another name for it long before biologists gave it one. They called it GAO, Rinaudo's method, which he began testing with just 10 farmers in 1983, and which is known today as Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration, or FMNR, and in Tanzania by the Swahili name Kisiki Hai, meaning living stump, solves the problem with nothing more than a blade. Select the strongest of the shoots growing from a single stump. Cut away the rest. Auxin production resumes in that one shoot almost immediately, and because it's feeding off a root system decades old, it can shoot up into a genuine tree in a fraction of the time a planted seedling would need for close to zero cost. By one widely cited estimate, roughly $20 per hectare against a conventional planting bill that can run more than 30 times higher. The idea should have spread overnight. It didn't. In 1984, a brutal famine hit Niger, and Rinaudo's organization launched a food for work program that introduced the pruning technique to roughly 70,000 people across 12,500 hectares. A real start, but a small one. For years afterward, adoption crawled. The obstacle wasn't ecological, it was bureaucratic, and it dated back to colonial era forestry law. Every tree in Niger, technically, belonged to the state. A farmer who nurtured a shoot into a tree on his own field could still be fined by a forestry guard for cutting it down later, even for firewood. Why protect something that isn't legally yours? For roughly 2 decades, that single rule quietly strangled a solution that was sitting in plain sight in millions of farmers' fields. It wasn't until local authorities began relaxing enforcement in the early 2000s, giving farmers real, practical ownership over what grew on their own land, that everything changed. Niger's government eventually went further still. On 30 July 2020, a presidential decree formally guaranteed farmers' rights over regenerated trees, making the country one of the first in the world to write natural regeneration directly into national law. Rinaudo would later put the shift bluntly. Once farmers felt they owned the trees in their fields, FMNR took off. And it did, fast enough that outsiders almost missed it happening. Chris Reai, a dryland specialist then affiliated with the Free University of Amsterdam, drove 500 miles east from Niger's capital in 2004 and was stunned to find the once barren route lined with trees. Reai teamed up with geographer Gray Tappan at the US Geological Survey, who pulled aerial photographs from 1975 and compared them against new satellite imagery, which is how they found that startling, arrow-straight border between Niger and Nigeria, visible purely because of tree cover. Their mapping confirmed it. Close to 5 million hectares regreened, roughly 200 million trees regrown, none of them planted, spread across some 25 million farming households. If you're wondering whether any of this held up under real pressure, 2005 answered that question. A locust invasion, the worst in 15 years, combined with a failed rainy season to trigger one of Niger's most severe food crises in decades, leaving over 2.5 million people at risk. Agroforestry researchers later documented that farmers who had trees on their land came through it differently than those who didn't, selling FMNR grown timber for grain, living off drought-resistant wild fruits, and leaves the trees still produced. Nationally, researchers affiliated with the International Food Policy Research Institute calculated the technique added roughly 500,000 tons of cereal production every year compared to the 1970s and 1980s, enough to feed about 2.5 million people, with one district in the Zinda region alone posting a documented cereal surplus of over 21,000 tons in a single year. Household income in FMNR areas rose by close to $1,000 a year on average. None of this stayed inside Niger's borders. The same pruning method, spread almost entirely farmer to farmer with no marketing budget, is now practiced in more than 25 countries. In Tanzania's Dodoma region, the Swahili-named Kisiki High program, run by the local Lead Foundation alongside the Dutch organization Just Dig It, has trained over 194,000 farmers across 300 communities and regenerated more than 15 million trees, using the exact same blade and stump principle Rinaudo stumbled onto decades earlier. The Tanzanian program pairs the pruning technique with a second ancient method called fanya juu and fanya chini, hand-dug contour trenches that catch rainwater before it can run off and erode the topsoil, and it has since expanded from Dodoma into the Singida and Arusha regions as well. Worldwide, the technique has now touched more than 18 million hectares, and the World Resources Institute estimates over 300 million more hectares of degraded land could respond the same way, an area larger than India, sitting dormant and waiting for nothing more complicated than a blade and someone willing to bend down. There's a second payoff too. Living trees pull moisture up from deep underground and release it back into the air through their leaves, a process called evapotranspiration, cooling the local microclimate and adding humidity above it. Researchers are still studying exactly how much that shifts regional rainfall, but the direction is well established. More trees, more moisture cycling back into the atmosphere, not less. In 2018, Rinaudo received the Right Livelihood Award, often described as the alternative Nobel Prize, for a discovery that cost him nothing but a knife and a willingness to look down instead of up. He's since summed up his own philosophy about it in one line. 90% of what I do is regreening mindscapes, not landscapes, mindscapes, because the real obstacle was never really the soil. It was the assumption that dead-looking land had nothing left to give, an assumption every one of us carries somewhere, about people, about places, about second chances, until something forces us to kneel down and actually look. If a story like this is worth remembering the next time you're ready to write something off as finished, hit that like button, subscribe for the next one, and send this to someone who still thinks the only way forward is to start from scratch. Sometimes the forest was never gone, it was only waiting to be noticed.